and I'm an indie developer. So what's that, you may ask? What's an indie dev? Well, the freedictionary.com has this definition: an independently owned business or a self-employed person. And while technically correct, our industry uses this term more specifically to refer to a person or a small team that develops an app or a game for the general public on their own, meaning that they don't have any outside investment. In my case, I built an app called Secrets. Secrets is a password manager for Mac and iOS. It lets you store passwords, credit cards, banking information securely on your device and have it all in sync across your Mac and iOS devices. But this talk is not about secrets. It's about starting your indie business. And today, I want to share with you 5 lessons I've learned along my journey here. But first, I need to address a common misconception about starting your business. Well, you see, many people believe that with a good idea, you just need to work hard, get it into practice, implement it, and when you launch, you've made it. The thing is, in most cases, that's never true. Okay? Starting your business is more of an iterative process instead of a one-shot thing. That means that launching is just step 1. So instead of going about it thinking this is a sprint and pretend you're Usain Bolt, you should pretend you're this guy, a marathon runner. By the way, this is Carlos Lopes. He won the first Olympic gold medal for Portugal in 1984. This building we're on is named after him. So here's the premise for this talk. Bootstrapping your indie business is not a sprint, it's a marathon. If you are to take anything from this talk, take this. All of the lessons I'm about to share make a lot more sense if you believe this is true. So let's get started. Lesson 1. Have a long-term vision. I just mentioned that starting your business is an iterative process and that launching is just step 1. If you have a long-term vision for what you're trying to build, then steps 2, 3, and so on become natural. You already know what you want to do after, okay? After the launch. So let me tell you a little story about my first startup. It was called Serves, and it's an online survey tool. It lets users build, deploy, and analyze online surveys in an easy-to-use, friendly web application. In many regards, Serves was and is a success. It's still online today, after 10 years. It still works just as fine, and it's still growing, albeit slowly. And it's still run by one of the original 4 co-founders. And when we launched a little over 10 years ago, we actually had a really nice reception. We appeared on TechCrunch. That said, we had the perfect balance between usability and features. We appeared on Read Write Web. They also had nice things to say. We even appeared on a print magazine that considered us one of the best survey tools out there. We got to work with Google to bring Serves in the initial offering of the Google Apps Marketplace. This was all probably in the first year after we launched. So, a pretty decent launch. What happened is we quickly amassed many paying users, more than enough to cover all of our expenses, but not enough to pay 4 salaries. There were 4 of us at the time. So we grew really fast in the first year, and then we kind of hit a plateau. Serves kept growing, but not as fast as we would want it. Looking back, one of the reasons I think this happened is so where was I? Oh yeah. So and we kind of hit the plateau, and I believe this happened because we didn't have a strong long-term vision for serves. We kind of knew what app we were trying to build, but did not have a plan for say 3 or 5 years. So that's lesson 1. Have a long-term vision. Lesson 2 is build something for yourself. Now, it's easy to see why choosing to build something you need has some advantages. For one, you just got your first client, you, right? It also means you should have a pretty good understanding of what it is that you're trying to solve. And if you're trying to start a business with it, you have probably already looked at the competition and either found it lacking or you have a different perspective on what you want to do with your solution. These are all good reasons to choose to build something for yourself. But one of the main ones, I think, is often overlooked. And this is what I want to talk to you about. I just mentioned how serves grew quickly and then it kind of hit a plateau. Because it stopped growing rapidly, that meant that I had to keep my day job and work on serves for a long time. And by a long time, I mean a few years. But I also mentioned that serves is still on mine today. And it's still working, and it's still run by one of the co-founders. So what happened? Why am I not working there anymore? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. I got tired. Working a day job and working at night when you get home can be really tiring really fast. So it was never going to last. Marathon runners have this expression called hitting the wall. They use it to describe the feeling they get after running a long time and they suddenly feel without energy, without any motivation to continue running. I felt that I had hit the wall with serves. And it took me a while to figure out why was that so. I mean, at the time I was working at Sapo building iOS apps, and I didn't feel that way towards my day job. I only felt that way towards serves. And eventually, I kind of discovered that I just had no interest in online service. I wasn't interested in building features for something I actually had no use for, right? I was not getting paid at the time, so it's not like I was doing it for the money. I was doing it to have fun. So my passion for technology and for building stuff wasn't enough to keep me motivated in those times. Contrast that with what I do today, which is build secrets, a password manager, something I use every single day, both on my Mac and iOS. You find that having your own business is full of ups and downs. Sometimes you will get featured in a print magazine or featured in the App Store. Sometimes you'll get a bad review. It's a roller coaster ride. So by building something for yourself, you are helping yourself stay motivated when you're feeling down. Okay? It's kind of your lifeline to pull you up in those difficult times. Lesson 3. Efficiency is key. With small teams or single developers like I am, you really need to focus on whatever features are that bring the most value to your users, especially if you're competing with established players with much larger teams than you have. So this means many things, but one of them is we need to avoid maintenance work. And by maintenance work, I mean any work you're doing just to keep things running, just to keep the status quo. That's maintenance work. For example, with serves, we did everything ourselves. We had application servers. We had our own database server. We ran our own mail server. We hosted an off-the-shelf CRM system. We even built our own invoicing system. That meant that quickly, we were doing a lot of maintenance work, making sure our database backups were running, making sure that we had security updates on all of the servers, making sure that our mail server was not blacklisted at any of the other mail providers, changing our invoicing system every time the bot changes. Here in Portugal, we kind of like to do that sometimes. In our defense, this was over 10 years ago, so what you can now take for granted, such as Amazon Web Services and SendGrid and MailChimp, those services didn't exist or were just getting started. I remember Amazon only had S3 and EC2, and EC2 was flaky at best. So don't sign up for any work that's not strictly necessary or that you can find someone else to do it for you at a fair price. The next part of being efficient is you need to choose your features wisely. You need to focus on whatever brings the most value to your users, and you need to focus on features that can last, that can run unassisted for years. What do I mean by that? For example, Secrets, which is a password manager, has a few competitors where they can actually change their users' passwords in various services automatically. How this works is the user will choose a bunch of different services, say Dropbox, Twitter, Facebook, and ask the app to change their passwords. And the app itself will simulate a login on the website, simulate the form post for the change password request, and then look at the result and see if it was successful or not. It's a great feature. It definitely brings value to their users. But it's also a maintenance nightmare. Every time one of these services changes their website, your feature is broken. And now that you've put your feature out there, your users expect it to work. So you have to run and fix it. Choose enough of these features, and soon enough, you'll just be doing maintenance and not improving your app. Okay. Another aspect of this is if a feature is either complex or it simply cannot work reliably. Here's another example. While building the first version of Secrets, I had a feature where if you submitted a registration form on a web page, Secrets would prompt you to save a login for that service. Again, it brings value to the users, but it's really hard to make it work correctly 100% of the time. This is because many websites can be creative in how they submit their forms and how they communicate success and error responses. So the feature would work most of the time, but there was a considerable amount of sites that either fail silently or Secrets would save a login that actually wasn't correctly submitted. So instead of dealing with the support requests this would eventually produce, and also because it could be frustrating to the users, that feature never saw the light of day. Although I had it pretty much working, I scraped it because it would be hard to maintain. last but not least, if you want to be efficient, you need to automate. And I just talked about building features to last. So the most important thing you can automate is your tests. So every time one of your automated tests runs, it's time it has saved from your time, right? Nowadays, secrets, a full integration of secrets takes about 20 minutes. If I were to do the same tests, both UI or unit tests, by hand, it could easily take me 2 hours. So automating your tests is surely one of the best things you can be doing for small teams. Besides giving you the confidence to continue evolving our product and bring more value to the users. But there are a lot of other things you can automate. Deploying your builds, for example. This is what I do for secrets. Deploying builds for production or beta channels. Updating my vocalization service with new strings I put in the app and vice versa. Uploading release notes in all of the 10 different languages I currently support. Taking screenshots of the app and submitting it to the App Store. To sum up, don't spend your time on something a machine can do for you. Lesson 4. Keep your costs in check. Now, we are lucky enough to be in an industry where you can start a business with little to no upfront costs. The biggest cost you have is your time to build your product. It's not like this is a restaurant. You're not building a restaurant or a tuk-tuk company. You don't need much money to start. Still, it can be quite some time until you see financial return on the time you have invested. So make sure you don't hang yourself in the recurring costs while we do so. Let's have a quick rundown of some of the services I use today. So I use Amazon Web Services, S3 and Lambda to store my websites and have a few simple services. I use CloudKit from Apple to synchronize users' data. I use Cloudflare to manage DNS and has a CDN for my websites. And it also has the advantage of, if you put it in front of your S3 buckets, it can actually reduce the cost of your Amazon bill, since Cloudflare has a very generous free tier. Mailgun, I use it to route all my email. Freshdesk, to manage support requests from users. Bitbucket to host and track issues. Microsoft App Center to track crash reports and analytics. And finally, MailChimp. These are all services that I greatly appreciate today and wish I had them 10 years ago when we were building serves. But remember that everything is a trade-off. So it's not like you shouldn't spend any money. It's just you need to consider carefully what is the value that you're bringing by buying that service or product. Let me give you another example. Hosted continuous integration systems for Mac and iOS are actually quite expensive, mainly because they require the service to use a Mac and Xcode to run. So on average, one of these services costs about $100 per month. Well, I have a bunch of tests I want to run, and I don't want to have my dev machine busy on that. So instead, what I did, I just bought the cheapest Mac Mini I could find and installed Xcode server on it and have it running my tests. Taking into account the monthly cost of these hosted services, the machine paid itself in about 6 months. Of course, I did sign up for some maintenance work while doing so. I have to update the Mac and Xcode. But I already had to do that for my dev machine, so I just do them both at the same time. Your goal is to create a sustainable business. So every time you're incurring some costs, you're making your job a bit harder. So think carefully about it. Lesson 5. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. It took me a long time to learn this lesson. So let's look quickly at my professional past. On the right, you have my indie career. On the left, my corporate career. I started my professional career at my college's IT department. I had a scholarship there, and then when I finished my degree, I became a full-time employee. That's also where I met the other 3 founders of Serves, and where we started actually building it. A few years later, while we were still building Serves, the iPhone SDK came out. And I was fortunate to get a job at Sapo on their initial team developing mobile apps. In my case, iOS apps. A few years later, after Serves had stagnated a bit, I realized I wanted to build something for myself, so I quit Serves and started building Secrets. In 2015, stuff at Sapo wasn't so great, mainly due to an acquisition, and I got an opportunity to work for Apple. At this time, Secrets was about 2 months away from version 1.0. Now, I already knew that launching didn't mean success. So I took the job, a contracting gig at Apple, and continued working in Secrets in my spare time. Finally, 3 years later, I was kind of forced to quit. So what happened was, as a contractor working for Apple, you can do whatever you want on the side. But your contract with Apple has to be close-ended or have a set end date. And while that was true when I started, the project I was in was a proof of concept. And that concept actually proved to be valuable and got promoted to a proper project. That meant that I couldn't keep working there as a contractor. So I was offered a job. The problem with being an Apple employee is you can't have anything on the App Store and keep developing it. So after 10 years of trying, I finally was forced to make a choice. It was either Apple or Secrets. Now, I kind of knew that if I didn't make the jump now, I probably never going to do it again. I would just stay working at Apple, have a nice paycheck, and be done with it. So I quit last year in August, and Secrets was already making money, not enough to cover all my expenses, but wasn't far from it. So since mid last year, I've been growing it, and in about 6 months, I could grow the revenue to a place where I can cover all my expenses. I'm not going to be rich anytime soon, but at least I'm working on one above. The conclusion here is the lure of a comfortable job with a predictable income can be very difficult to pass. There's an interesting statistic from the US where they found that most companies, most unicorns on the US, on the United States, are built by average students. And what they found is the top scorers usually got a very high-paying job right after college, They started working on it, and that's it. They had their desk job for the rest of their lives. The average students didn't have such high paychecks and were best tempted to accept them instead of doing what they want and starting their own business. So keep that in mind. There's no perfect moment to start your business. I know that I said it was 5 lessons, but this is a bonus lesson. With great products comes great responsibility. So, nowadays I build secrets. It's a password manager. It's easy to see why there's some responsibility inherent in it. After all, I'm storing sensitive data for my users, and I wouldn't want them to either lose their data or have it exposed. But what I advocate is whatever it is you build, you shouldn't underestimate how important it can be for your users and how reliant they can be on it. So, here's another story from Surfs. It's a weekday, late at night, probably almost midnight, and I got a text from one of our monitoring systems, which we also built ourselves. And it said a server was down. So I'm tired. I go ahead, grab my laptop, and sure enough, one of the servers isn't responding. After some time, I can finally SSH in, and I start looking around. Database was fine. CPU was high, but there's still enough room. Load average was high, but nothing critical. And I finally go to the web server, and sure enough, we were maxing out our Apache workers. And the web server wasn't being able to respond to all the requests. Now, at this point, we've had a few big companies using servers and having thousands and thousands of respondents on their service, and we always could handle it. So I opened the Apache access logs, and fortunately and unfortunately, I still had the reverse DNS lookup on the access logs. That meant that for each access, instead of seeing the IP address of the requester, I could see the host name. I open the logs, and it's just spewing at me. I pause, and I quickly notice a pattern where all of the requests are coming from Egypt. I found that a bit strange, and I thought, well, this looks like I'm being attacked. This is the denial of service attack. And we've had been attacked a few times before with different patterns, not to the web server, but attacked anyway. So I thought, well, it's late, I'm tired. This is a DOS, so I do what any former sysadmin does, and I placed a rule on our firewall that simply blocked the largest ISP in Egypt. Sure enough, after I add that rule to the firewall, serves us back on, working just fine as it usually does. Now, I go to bed, and the next morning, I got a text from my co-founder saying that wasn't the denial of service attack. So he was able to track down the requests to a Facebook page in Egypt with millions of followers. And a few Google Translates later, we find out that this is actually a page from an activist working on the Egyptian revolution of 2011. And as you can imagine, their followers in this time of turmoil were very engaged in whatever it is that Facebook page posted. So whenever he posted one of our surveys, we had thousands and thousands of requests in the first couple of minutes. So I quickly started working on improving our capacity. We had a standby server that became active. We tweaked our Apache config to better make use of system resources, and we changed some of our load balancing rules. And I was kind of confident that we had at least doubled, maybe even tripled, our capacity. Interestingly, the day after I did this, we got another call from Google. And they kind of asked us, hey, we know what's going on. Do you need any help? They were basically offering their infrastructure to host servers to better handle these surveys. And this happened because the person running that Facebook page had actually ties to Google Egypt, and they really wanted to use serves. There are a few larger players than us in the survey market, but we got support for right-to-left languages, UTF-8 Unicode, and the Arabic script since the beginning. So we were kind of popular in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and he wanted to make sure that his surveys would feel native to his followers. So I explained Google what happened, I told them what I did, and they said, okay, let's see what happens in the next survey. And sure enough, the next survey, we're able to handle it, and he continues to use our service to organize their protests and everything else. So it's funny to think that something 4 guys built while still in college eventually had, even if a small part, but it had a part in the takedown of a government. So that was actually the best lesson. I hope you find these lessons useful, but please note that your mileage may vary. Another important takeaway is that I took 10 years to get here, but that's fine if you're having fun. So whatever you choose to do, make sure you have fun with it. Good luck, and thank you. Okay, we have about 10 minutes. If anyone wants to ask a question, now's the time. Hey, okay. So the question was, if I have other side projects, what do I do? Do I build another company to work on them, or a secret one? Well, I'd say in most cases, if you're really trying to start a business, you should stick with one. Okay? Either the project you have, either you think it has failed, or you are no longer having fun with it, and that's where you start exploring other opportunities. But you should really stay focused on one thing that you do and do it right. Do it better than everyone else. If you divide your time in different projects, it gets much, much harder to succeed. Remember that we're talking about small teams, right? Small teams can only do so much. You need to stay efficient, you need to stay focused. So my recommendation is choose the one project you enjoy the most and focus on that, okay? Of course, there will be times where maybe you can work with another company with a small thing or something that you might find useful or you might enjoy. Sure, go ahead. Spend 2 or 3 months also working on something else, but make sure that you don't do that constantly, because otherwise none of your projects will be successful if you divide your time in all of them, okay? So my recommendation is focus on the single thing you enjoy the most and work at it. Okay? Yep.
Branding, UX, marketing, whatever. And maybe you can learn, but you're not gonna reach a good level, but you don't have the funding to pay for someone else. How do you deal with that situation?
Okay, that's actually a great question. So um, being a developer means you're probably good at coding, but you're not so good at designing or marketing or many other stuff you need to do when you're building a company. I guess the hardest part to solve is design. If you don't have the design skills, you really need to be working with someone else, and either find someone that is interested in your problem, the problem you're trying to solve, and offer them some either a part of the company, some metrics where they also get more money if you are successful. Right? You can't pay them by the hour because you probably don't have the funds to do it. But if you find someone who enjoys or who thinks it's a good idea, then you probably can get with a proposal to say, okay, we'll work on this together, and either you get X% of the company or you get Y% of the proceeds for 2, 3 years, something like that. Okay? And if he keeps working with you, then he'll keep getting proceeds from your app. But yeah, sometimes you have no choice. Learning to design is not an option. Designers go to school for 5 years. So don't do that. Try to work with someone else who knows how to do it, okay? Regarding marketing, well, I guess there you can try to wing it yourself. I mean, I've been trying to. I'm not an expert, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of was a bit more successful when I left Apple, because I could actually focus on contacting journalists, working on my App Store page, working on metrics, on analytics, and see what works and what's not. I wasn't doing that while I still had my day job, because I didn't have time. So every time I had time to work on secrets, I would work on features, not in everything else that's required to build the company. So as soon as you free yourself from the day job, then you can spend more time making friends with journalists, getting yourself known, trying to contact Apple to be featured, all of that stuff. All of it takes time, right? And marketing is much harder to hire someone than a designer, okay? Mainly because for apps, there aren't that many companies who work specifically with apps. They do branding and they do websites and do stores, but apps, it's a very niche, a very specific business. So you probably know more than they do on which sites you want to appear, on which reporters you want have writing reviews for you. And Apple works with developers, right? They work with you directly, not the company, not a third company. They probably do that for stuff like EA or big companies, but for indies, they work with us directly, okay? So for designer, you really need to know someone and hire. Everything else, you could probably wing it in the start, and if you get an abstraction, then you can probably hire someone else, okay?
Customer support as an indie.
Okay, the question was customer support as an indie. Well, it actually works fine. I don't have that many support requests per day. Right now, it should be about, say, 5 to 10 requests per day. So usually, most of them are recurring things. So They ask about pricing, either if they have education discounts. The mails are quite repetitive, so you just set up some predefined responses, and you can quickly get through those 10 emails in one sitting in about 10 minutes. So at my scale, it's fine. It's not a problem yet. I know one of my competitors has about 3,000 pending emails to respond at any time. And they have a team of customer support, I think of about 5 persons, 5 people. So when you get to that scale, you probably have enough money to pay someone to do that for you, okay? But in the beginning, answering yourself is just fine and also a good idea. And the reason is, one, you really get the feel on what people are asking. What are their pain points on what is missing from the app that you need to be building? So support requests is my number one thing that I use to choose what I'm going to do next. I have a long-term vision, but I can rejig what features I'm building in the pipeline, right? It also means that you can actually be efficient. I have, for countless times, I have someone say, hey, this doesn't work, or this translation has a typo. And my answer is, it's fixed. Because data transmitted, I just test it, see if it's right or wrong, fix it, and then say, hey, thank you, it's fixed. The next update, you'll see the fix. So, and customers really respond to this. One of my worries was that being a small developer, people would not trust me enough to store their data. Turns out, they don't care. As long as you provide quick responses and correct, and you are nice to them, they don't care if I'm 1 or if I'm 100. They just want their problem to be solved. So do your QA in the beginning. That's really important. And do customer support. If you have a recurring request, then you probably have a problem and you need to fix it. I have done some changes in the app to reduce the amount of requests I have. For example, a common problem was that people didn't understand why the Mac version of the app was a separate purchase from the iOS version. This is because both app stores are separate. There's no sharing of purchases between the apps, one app store and the other. This is how Apple made it. So I had to change the screen, the purchase screen on the app, to actually have it written that says, hey, the iOS counterpart and vice versa is not included in your purchase. So after putting that in the app, the queries about that issue just disappeared. Okay? That's it. But let me just give one opportunity to the one in the back, because he hasn't asked anything.
Congratulations for the presentation. My question is, how did you actually bootstrap? Did you invest your own money on advertisement, and how did you get your very first client for your customer? Do you have you invest your own money, or did you have external investment on your own serves and either in secrets? Thank you.
Okay, so the question was, did I have any external investment, and how did I get my first client? What did I do? So no, in both cases, both in serves and in secrets, there was no outside investment. Otherwise, I wouldn't actually be called an indie, right? In serves, we actually wanted to have some investment because there were 4 of us, and we even searched for it. But this is, say, 12 years ago, I think, when we started. And the only campaigns we saw were about getting a space in, I think at the time it was Tagus Park. So there were a few companies that would give you an office for a year or 2, free of charge, everything included, and they would keep something for our company. So say 5 or 10%, I don't remember. The thing is, none of us really needed an office. like I don't need an office today. So that wasn't a choice. In Secrets, I also didn't. I was working on Secrets on part-time. I also never considered an investment because I actually didn't need it. So my investment is my time. You may, well, I'm not saying don't take an investment because it might be good for you, right? You can really shorten the time it takes to be successful and sustainable if you accept investment. So it's not like you shouldn't do it. I just didn't want to do it. Okay. Regarding getting your first customer, well, I've been dealing with apps, iOS apps and Mac apps for quite some time, so I kind of knew what I had to do. When I launched, I had already set up a bunch of advertisements in a few blogs of the Mac and iOS related blogs. I had Product Hunt and Hacker News, all of that set up. So when I launched, I had, in quick succession, 5 or 6 articles that were going to be written about secrets. Okay, so and also there are a few contacts you can use to let Apple know that you're launching, and I was successful then. I remember I got featured on iOS at launch on iOS App Store before the redesign, and a few months later I got featured on the Mac App Store as well. So you just need to work a bit. I did spend some money initially to sponsor those blog posts, but I haven't done any of those sponsors since then. I guess my advice is try to understand which journalists, which sites are better suited for your audience, and try to create a relationship with them. And by creating a relationship, I mean let them know when you do an update, let them know what you're doing, let them test your app before anyone else, so that they can actually write something in the day that you launch. Okay, and this has proven successful. But I now have a few contacts, both in the States and in other European companies, that already know who I am, what I do, and what Secrets is about. So every time I launch, I let them know that I'm going to do it and what's changing. Okay. You had one more.
Ok, em português. A minha questão era perceber se, portanto, se a longo ou a médio prazo, se o objetivo para a empresa, se continuar a ser indie significa continuar a ser uma equipa relativamente pequena, ou se pretendes crescer e escalar.
Okay, so the question was, what do I tend to do in the future with Secrets? Do I want to stay a small company or do I want to grow? I think I probably want to stay a small company. I mean, I do want to hire more people because there's a lot of do. My vision is still not halfway there. So I definitely want to grow and hire more, but from experience, I know that bigger isn't always better. And working on a single product, if you have a development team of more than, say, 4 or 5, it starts getting inefficient. Okay? It's not that you can have more customer support or marketing and all that, but you have the core development team should stay small for, if I'm building just a single product, to remain efficient. And I've seen teams grow, and it seems like after 5 people, adding one more doesn't do anything. The amount of complexity it brings just slows the product enough so that the value he brings is netted 0. So you're not doing anything faster, you're just wasting more money and more people's time. So I really think that small teams are better for most projects. Okay? That's it? Okay, thank you.